Road hazards. They're everywhere, especially around here in the springtime. Potholes are absolutely everywhere. You can't avoid them. Every rider knows the importance of looking at the road ahead and watching for those hazards and trying to avoid them. It's part of riding. It's probably the most important thing to remember, is to pay attention to where you're going and what you're doing. But you know, one thing experienced riders learn how to do is how to avoid a road hazard when you encounter it. You see, an inexperienced rider is likely to find a pothole or find a piece of debris, whatever it might be. They're going to see it and they're going to fixate on it, and they're going to end up hitting it every time. But a more experienced rider is going to see the hazard and look away. And by looking away, they can look just to the side or wherever. Basically, you want to look where you want your bike to go. And by focusing there, you'll be able to get around the hazard no problem. But the thing is, if you look at the hazard, if you look at the dead possum in the road, you're going to hit the dead possum and you're going to be cleaning guts off your tire and your fender when you get home. Where you put your eyes, that's where your bike is going to go. There's a really good life lesson in that. Because in life, there's a lot of spiritual hazards in the road. You know, God calls it sin. We might as well go with that. Maybe temptation before it becomes sin. They're all around us. They're everywhere. They're more abundant than potholes in the Wisconsin roads in the springtime. You can't do life without coming across spiritual hazards along the way. On a bike, you learn to ride through some rough roads without hitting the hazards to keep you from a wreck. If you want to live a life that's as free as possible from the wreckage and carnage that sin can and will cause, you have to learn to navigate around the hazards. The way to avoid the spiritual hazards is the same way to avoid the road hazards. Just like the inexperienced rider might focus on the hazards and end up running right into them, the inexperienced or immature Christian can make the same mistake. It's all about where you point your eyes. When I see temptation coming, I've got two options. I can look at the temptation, I can look at the sin, I can focus on how attractive it is, how hard it is to avoid, or I can focus on the path that I should be taking and look right around the temptation. And I'll ride right past it unscathed. Hebrews 12:1 and 2 talks about a race that we're all running. The race of life where the track is full of hazards. And it says, let us run the race before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who endured the cross and is seated at the right hand of God. Let me tell you, from his vantage point, he can see all the hazards we might have ahead of us. He knows everything we're going to face, and he can see us, and if we keep our eyes on him, he'll keep us on the right path. We don't need to look at the obstacles. We don't need to look at the sin and the temptation. We focus on him. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. He will keep us away from those obstacles. He'll keep us away from the wreckage of sin if we keep our eyes focused on him. What occupies our mind affects our life in a big way. Philippians 4:8 says, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is praiseworthy, think about such things. If our mind is on the right things, the obstacles, the hazards that we come across, we'll scoot right by them. You know, when we were younger, my dad used to take us for bicycle rides on the Elroy Sparta Trail a few hours away from here. And this bike trail had 3 tunnels. They were long tunnels that go through these as close to mountains as you get in Wisconsin. And these tunnels have no lights in them, and they are dark. And one of the lessons you learn when you ride that trail and go through those tunnels, the farther into the tunnel you get, the darker it gets. And there's glimmers of light on the walls that are just very rough and irregular. And you catch glimpses of them, and you're tempted to look at them to see where you are. But it's so distorted because it's dark. And if you start looking at the walls or you look at the ground in front of you, I guarantee you're gonna bump into the wall. You're gonna step into the streams of water that run down the sides. The way to get through those dark tunnels is to look straight ahead at the light at the end of the tunnel. As long as you keep your focus on the end of that tunnel and that bright light that shines, you're going to be able to navigate it without running into the wall. By focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel rather than the sides and the hazards that are in the tunnel, you get to the other side every time unscathed, with your feet still dry. And that's what Jesus does for us. If we keep our eyes fixed on Him, all the hazards, all the sins and the carnage that it causes, we miss it. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says that no temptation has overtaken us except what is common to man. There's nothing new under the sun. The same traps that have been getting people ever since Adam are the same ones that are out there now. But the verse goes on to say that God is faithful and He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But He will also provide the way of escape so you can endure it. So yeah, we are going to come across temptations. We're going to come across those hazards in life. And it's nothing new. It's nothing that man hasn't been dealing with since the beginning of creation. But if we keep our eyes on Jesus, He will provide the way around it. He will provide the way of escape. It's a promise that we can count on. So take your eyes off the dead raccoons. Get your attention away from whatever it is that's trying to wreck you, that's trying to bring you down, and turn your focus onto Jesus. With your attention on Him, you'll bypass every hazard that comes your way. And one more thing on that note, as I ride the Wisconsin roads as frequently as I do, you start to learn which roads are full of hazards. There's some roads that are just in awful shape. They're nothing but potholes, nothing but bumps and debris, or construction, or whatever it might be. You know, you ride those roads a couple of times, you start to remember them. And you know what you do? You take a different road. You know, in life, the people you surround yourself with, the places you go, the situations that you put yourself into, they all have an impact on your life. And if I take a road that doesn't have any potholes, I'm going to have a smoother ride. If I take a rough road, I'm going to have problems. If you tend to go down paths that are going to lead you to destruction, that are full of temptations, and you put yourself in situations where you're setting yourself up to fail, you're going to fail. I suggest you take a different road. So what do I do to keep my focus right? What are some practical things you can do to help keep your eyes on Jesus and keep your mind in the right place? You know, I get up early every morning and I spend at least an hour. That seems a little extreme for some, and maybe it is, but I spend an hour every morning reading usually a chapter in the New Testament, a chapter in the Old Testament. I do some various reading, and I spend some serious time in prayer every morning. I never miss. And that time that I spend in Bible reading and prayer, it's not just a duty that I do because that's what you do if you're a Christian. It is quite honestly time spent with Jesus. It's time when I know I'm hearing from Him and I'm talking to Him and He's listening to me. He talks to me, and it gets my mind focused on the right things right from the beginning of the day. And I ask Him for guidance for the rest of the day, and He takes me through it. And throughout the day, I try to spend time in prayer. As things come to mind, I stop and pray. When I notice my mind isn't where it should be, and yeah, that's far more often than I wish it was, but when my mind's not where it's supposed to be, I fix it. I pray, I do what I've got to do, I get my mind refocused. I get out there and ride and stay wild. One more request. I would really appreciate it if you'd consider going to YouTube and going to Rumble and subscribing to my page, Wild Viking. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, it just means you'll get notifications. But if you do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. thanks in advance.